Thank you, Diane. Appreciate that. If you have not received a bulletin, Todd is still available in the back to hook you up. On the front are our announcements, and on the back is a place to take some notes. So I have an uncle who owns a construction business, and he has this office building on a good-sized piece of property that he uses to run his business out of. And for several years, he's had issues with lawn companies struggling to kind of keep up with the unique demands of the property. You see, he's got a couple retention ponds. I'm not sure if you've ever had to mow around those, but they're kind of difficult. You got that slope, and you got a lot of tall grass, and in Florida, who knows what's living in there. The property has quite a few palm trees on it, and so it seems like every time the wind blows, some more palm fronds fall out, and so you got a lot of cleanup work, a lot of trash on the property, just the very nature of it being a kind of a facility for a construction company, a lot of boxes and packaging material. Every time the wind blows, it blows around, and I think kind of the tension he's had is these companies, you really got to spend almost as much time cleaning up the property before you can even start cutting the grass. Now, I don't know who takes care of it now, but there was a couple years where he paid my cousin and I to keep up this property for him. And we first started doing this when we were like 12, 13 years old, yeah, pretty young. It would take us almost the entire day out of a week, right, to get this property taken care of. Now, we would do this primarily in the summer, right? Things grow all the time in Florida, but things grow even faster in the summer, of all the sun and all the rain. And so you think summer in Florida, it's hot, it's humid, keeping cool is tough. And so one of these weeks we were out there working on the property, and we were just taking a break in this giant shop he has, sipping on some water, talking about how hot it was, trying to figure out how can we cool down. And we noticed, or kind of begin to realize, this super large chest freezer he had in the shop. See, he had a number of construction crews that every morning they'd pick up their truck and their equipment. They had these giant coolers on the back. They'd toss these bags of ice in of water. They keep it on the back of the truck for all the guys. And so we get an idea, right? We're thinking, cooler? A lot of ice? That's a great way to cool down. So we did exactly what you think we did, right? We literally got in that giant cooler and sat on the ice, and we cooled down. Right? Not a good idea, right? My uncle wasn't too thrilled about it for multiple reasons. My cousin and I still laugh about that. We were just sitting in there having a good time. Right? It's Florida, right? It's hot. The heat is a very real problem. But the way we attempted to deal with that problem was problematic. Right? Our response to the thing in front of us was not a good response, right? There were other ways to cool down. We could have literally walked into the office with air conditioning and cooled down better than that. But here's the thing. If we're honest with ourselves, everyone here today, if we're honest, we often don't respond well to the things in our life. We don't respond well to God when He's at work in our lives. In fact, many times we struggle to respond well to God's faithfulness in our lives. Every single one of us should be able to proclaim that God has been good to us. He's been faithful to us. He has taken care of us. And now I'm going to speak for myself here, but often I'll respond to God's work in my life in a negative or a critical way. I remember when I was in seminary, complaining to God quite often, "Hey God, why can't you give me a full ride scholarship? Right? Why do I got to work so hard to make this happen?" When instead, I should have been responding to God, saying, "God, thank you for the opportunity to even be here." That's how I respond. And again, maybe that's how you respond as well to God's faithfulness, with a bit of criticism and negativity. Right? When one of my cars breaks down, which we've been on a good streak lately, they've been running okay. But I would complain to God, "God, why can't you give me the means to drive a nicer car where this won't be an issue?" When instead, my response should be, "God, thank you so much for how you've blessed me with multiple means of transportation." Right? I walk places not because I have to, but because I want to. Right? I have multiple ways of getting around. Right? It's a first world problem, and I'm complaining about it. Sometimes we see other people's lives, and we deal with envy. We wish we had their life. And we say to ourselves, "God, why can't you bless me like you've blessed them?" I'm guilty of that at times. And my response shouldn't be one of criticism or negativity, but in my life, I should be singing God's praises, saying, God, thank you for the amazing life you've given me, right? A great wife, 5 great healthy kids, a great church to be a part of. My health is still intact, right? My needs are taken care of. I don't deserve a single thing God has given me. That's how I should respond, but the reality is often I don't respond that way. And if you're honest with yourself, you probably don't either. And so what I want us to talk about today as we dive into the second to last week in our series in the book of Nehemiah is what are some good ways that we can respond to God's faithfulness? Since we all seem to struggle with this, right? We all tend to respond to God's work in our life with negativity or criticism. What are some good ways we respond to his faithfulness? So we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 12 today. If you didn't bring your Bible, you can grab the Black Pew Bible there. That's page 479. As we begin to wrap up our time in the book of Nehemiah, and if you've missed any of it, small recap, the book of Nehemiah is written by the man Nehemiah, as he in many ways recounts his experiences traveling back to Jerusalem to see the walls of the city rebuilt. So Nehemiah steps onto the scenes in Nehemiah chapter 1 as the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes, the great and powerful Persian king. And he learns that his people, the Jewish people, some of which have traveled back to Jerusalem, are not doing well. You see, the city was absolutely destroyed before they went to exile. And he believes and expects that since a group of people have returned, the city has been rebuilt. The walls are back up, the temple's up, but that's not quite the case. And so he develops this burden to go back and see the city restored. He talks to King Artaxerxes about this. He sends him on his way. And Nehemiah is now the governor of Judah, and he oversees this construction project. And this has really kind of been the entirety of Nehemiah so far, building this wall, dealing with problems along the way. They've rededicated their hearts and their lives to God after the walls are up. They've repopulated the city. Right? His vision of seeing the city rebuilt has been realized. So as we look at chapter 12, I want you to view this chapter through the lens of a response by the Hebrew people of how God has done everything for them, right? They're responding to his goodness in their lives and in the lives of their country. God has been incredibly faithful to the Hebrew people. He's blessed them abundantly. And now that the walls are up, now that they find themselves in a place where they can pause for a moment, they are seeking to properly respond to God's faithfulness. Years of opposition. This rebuilding effort, spiritual renewal. The peak of the book is now reached, and the walls are complete. The people have been renewed, cities repopulated, and now they're gathering to dedicate this city to God. And how they respond to God's faithfulness in their life is instructive for us as we seek to respond to his faithfulness as well. So, what are some good ways that we respond to God's faithfulness? It's no secret to anyone who knows me for more than like 6 minutes that I love dirt bikes, right? I kind of grew up riding them. I love going outside. I love working on the bike. I love all parts of it. And so now that my boys are getting a little bigger to kind of truly ride, I'm excited about getting them on bikes as well. It gets me excited. In fact, we picked up one earlier this summer that I finally got running and working. But I want my kids to enjoy them too, right? I want to indoctrinate them to have this love as well. So I began this process of indoctrinating them early, right? There's some fun pictures. There's Ren there on the left. We bought that bike while we were in Texas before he could even walk, okay? So we've had that for a while. Before he could even walk, right, we bought that bike for him, and now he's almost too big for it. They're on the right there, that right picture. Roger might recognize that location. There is Ren and Haddon as they're a little bit bigger, right, on these toy bikes, right? I love motorcycles. I love dirt bikes. I have sought to indoctrinate them from the very beginning to love them as well. You see, as a parent, right, we pass on things that matter to us. Every single one of us do this. Many of you love farming. You love agriculture, ranching, and you have passed down your love for farming to your kids, whether intuitively or say whether it be actively or passively, you've done that. Maybe you passed down your hate for it too. All right, maybe you've passed down your love for sports to your kids. Maybe there's a certain movie or video game that you enjoyed playing growing up, and you've passed that on to your kids. And I hope that every single one of us has passed down our love to Jesus to our kids. The point is, we pass on things that matter to us. See, this is important because as we look at chapter 12 here, we see something occurring in the life of the Hebrew people. It's one of the ways in which they respond to God's faithfulness. One of the ways in which we respond to his faithfulness. And that is, here's our first blank. One good way to respond to God's faithfulness is to facilitate a heritage of faithfulness to God. Now we're going to go through a series of verses here for the first 26 verses of chapter 12. Stick with me. It might be confusing, but we're going to bring it together here, and I'm going to show you what Nehemiah is doing here. All right, so remember, the walls of the city are up. The city has been repopulated. The outside threats are minimized. The people have been spiritually renewed. And now they begin a period of dedication. In fact, we did something similar here in our church. Right after a couple years into the consolidation process here as a church, we had a special service where we came together and we celebrated how God has been at work. And we dedicated ourselves and our church to whatever God wanted to do with us. We even had a document drawn up. It's over there in that kind of that display we have over there where people signed their names and committed to this church and whatever God might choose to use it for. So Nehemiah does something pretty similar. We kind of see begin to arise here in the first 26 verses of chapter 12. He's effectively saying through these verses, these are the people who are leading us. And this list he provides serves as a testament and a reminder of their past and their present faithfulness. So, verse 1. Nehemiah starts out, right, with this list. Remember, this is what this is right now. He says this, these are the priests and the Levites who came up with Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua. So Zerubbabel is a descendant of David. Think political leader. He's the Persian-appointed governor of Judah at the time. This is before Nehemiah shows up. Kind of the first group of exiles returning to the land. Jeshua is the high priest. So here are two leaders for the Hebrew people that returned about 90 years before Nehemiah returns to Jerusalem. So he starts out with these names. Skip up to verse 10. And Jeshua was the father of Jehoiakim. And I'm just going to kind of keep going with these names, so roll with me, okay? Jeshua was the father of Jehoiakim. All right, so we're beginning to see, if you're reading through these first 26 verses, you begin to see a progression of generation to generation, right? Passing on their faith, passing on things of importance, right? High priest to high priest. So we have Jeshua to Jehoiakim, and Jehoiakim's tenure as high priest started roughly 50 years before Nehemiah shows up on the scene. But then you continue on. Next generation, Jehoiakim goes to Eliashib, right? Another generation passes, right? We're three in now. Jehoiakim to Eliashib. Eliashib was likely the high priest when Nehemiah arrives. And then we go from Eliashib to Joiadiah. Yeah, Joiadiah. I don't know. We'll go with that. So we have this progression again. And then you get to verse 11. There we go. I had this there. I knew I did. Verse 11, Joiadiah, the father of Jonathan, and then Jonathan, the father of Jaddua. I had a way I wanted to pronounce this, and it's just not rolling right now. But here we go. We see this progression of these high priests. We have this record that is composed. 6 generations total. Verse 22 to 23. In the days of Eliashib, Joiadiah, Jonathan, and Jaddua, the Levites were recorded as heads of fathers' houses. So too were the priests in the region of Darius the Persian. As for the sons of Levi, their heads of fathers' houses were written in the books of the Chronicles until the days of Jonathan, the son of Eliashib. So we have a record of those who have served effectively for 6 generations here for us in the first 26 verses of Nehemiah. This record extends, again, for 12 individuals, right? All the way from Jeshua to Jaddua. I just pronounced that differently, but it's going to be different each time. You guys ever do that? You read and you don't fully pronounce it. You read it in your head. This is what happens, okay? Here's the thing. These are the names. We don't know how to pronounce them, at least your pastor doesn't, because reading comprehension, I struggle with, right? I was not hooked on phonics. But here's what I want you to see. We have 6 priests spanning 200 years, right? 6 priests spanning 200 years, and some of it was probably authored after Nehemiah's time because these guys came a little after Nehemiah. Remember, Eliashib was probably the high priest when Nehemiah showed up. All right, all of this, and you guys are like, I don't know what to make of this, right? Where are you going with this, Justin, right? What is the point? Why would Nehemiah record all of these men's names? Why do I care? I'm glad you asked. You got to remember context, okay? The city, again, has been repopulated. Outside threats minimized. The people have been spiritually renewed. And now a period of dedication begins. And Nehemiah is concerned with getting things done right. These men, as high priests, were appointed by God to these roles. They can trace their backgrounds all the way back to Aaron, right? The first high priest. These were the people that God put in charge of running the temple, of leading the people spiritually. This is Nehemiah's way of saying, right, check me. These are the people who are leading us, who have been leading us, who are leading us, and later when they pick up this book, these are the ones who led after Nehemiah's time. This list serves as a testament and a reminder of the past and present faithfulness of certain leaders in the nation and the faithfulness of those that they led. They had to pass on their faith, again, from generation to generation, and these important practices were very important for the health and life of the Hebrew people. This was important to Nehemiah, it was important to God, and it should be important to us as well. They are, again, entering a period of dedication, celebrating what God has done for their nation, and as part of that, they are celebrating the faithful heritage of their nation and those who help make that heritage possible. So if we want to celebrate God's faithfulness in our lives, one thing we can do is facilitate a heritage of faithfulness. It was a few years ago, I was approached by someone in this community, and they knew who I was, they knew what I did, and they began engaging in spiritual conversation with me. This sometimes happens when you tell people you're a pastor. And they began to communicate to me that they obviously didn't attend church, but they felt like church was important. And that when they had kids, when his wife and him began to have kids, they planned on bringing their kids to church. The problem was, and the irony of that statement was, they didn't go anywhere at the time. And I remember ending that conversation with, why don't you start attending now so when those kids come, right, you can show them through your actions how important it is because you're there. To my knowledge, they're not going anywhere right now. Well, you guys see the irony in that statement. They say it's important, but they're not modeling it. They wanted their kids to have a faith that they didn't have. So the question I have for you, when you think of facilitating a heritage of faithfulness to God, do you have a faith that's worth passing down? Or do you hold your kids to a standard that you don't even meet? Right? You as the parent, as the leader, the grandparent, the model for that next generation, you set the standard. They're watching you. This is, again, why I believe Nehemiah has these 6 high priests listed, right? These are the guys who are helping to set the spiritual temperature of our country. They are interested in passing on the faith, right? So this starts out this dedication process. If you want to respond to God's faithfulness in your life, one thing you can do is pass on a heritage of faithfulness to your kids, to your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews. Facilitate a heritage of faithfulness. Now, during our consolidation service that we had a time of dedication to Christ. We dedicated not only ourselves to the work that God might choose to do through us, but we also dedicated our very facilities to God, right? We were praying, like, literally, God, however you want to use this building and what you've given us, the resources, we pray that we are open and willing to do that, right? We wanted to take the time to express complete surrender to whatever God might choose to do in us and through us. This is one way to express thanks to God's faithfulness to us, by completely surrendering to Him. A good way to respond to His faithfulness is complete surrender to God. So chapter 12, once more, first 26 verses, we have a list of high priests and Levites, folks working in the temple. These are the guys that are leading the nation, helping set the spiritual temperature, passing on this important spiritual heritage. And now we have this effort of rededication, right? They're going to dedicate the wall, dedicate the city to God. And so people begin gathering here to consecrate themselves, to have this celebration, this parade of sorts, to dedicate everything here to God, to thank Him for His faithfulness to them and to the nation. Verse 27 and 28. And at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought the Levites in all their places, to bring them to Jerusalem, to celebrate the dedication with gladness, with thanksgivings and with singing, with cymbals, harps, and lyres. And the sons of the singers gathered together from the district surrounding Jerusalem. Right? So all the people are gathering together for this big celebration. There's a lot of effort and fanfare that goes into this. We don't know how long this dedication process took or how long it was in the making, how long the walls were up before they did this. Probably a little bit of time. But this was an extensive celebration, celebrating an important event for the people of Israel, right? The city had been destroyed, but now the temple is back up. The walls are in place. They have been restored, right? There's likely thousands of people there. And so a lot of priests need to be there to help these people make sacrifices at the temple to assist with the purification rituals that were going to take place. Again, big, huge events, huge celebration. Verse 30, and the priests and the Levites purified themselves, and they purified the people and the gates and the walls. So the priests are there to help purify the people, to consecrate them before this event. Right? This was a common requirement before a religious service. And so what they do is they come together, they gather, and then they have a parade of sorts. Right? They kind of get two groups, and they split in half. This is an image that I showed a number of weeks ago of these walls. And so they gather there at the valley gate. You can see that on the right. I've circled it. And there's a group that starts this parade going south, and there's a group that starts the parade going north, where they ultimately end up at the temple. Take a look at verse 31 of chapter 12. Then I brought the leaders of Judah up onto the wall and appointed two great choirs that gave thanks. One went to the south, and on the wall to the dung gate. Now skip up to verse 38. The other choir of those who gave thanks went to the north, and I followed them with half of the people on the wall, above the tower of the ovens to the broad wall. So these two groups split. There's a huge parade as they meet up at the temple. They are serious about this process. They are dedicating and worshiping along the way, dedicating the walls, the city. They are celebrating what God has done. And along the way, remember, the city's been repopulated. I imagine, right, they're inviting residents to come out to celebrate with them. And again, chapter 12 is an interesting chapter in Nehemiah. And if you don't ever read the Bible and you say, why is this here? You need to read it a little bit deeper. Because here's the thing, sometimes you read a passage like this, especially the first 26 verses, and then you read all the way to 42, and you're like, again, why is this here? Why do I care that they're marching around the city, celebrating, dedicating the city and the walls and everything here to God? How does this inform me about how I'm to respond to God's faithfulness? Well, we see them, right, responding to His faithfulness with repentance, dedication, worship, right, complete surrender. God, everything here belongs to you. These walls, this temple, our very lives, they are responding with complete surrender. And many of us, if we want to respond well to God's faithfulness in our lives, that's how we have to respond as well, with complete surrender. Surrendering our will to God. choosing to love what he loves, committing ourselves to faithfully following him. Right? One of the best ways to show God that you appreciate his faithfulness and the work that he does in your life is by surrendering to him. Everything, not just your heart, but your things, your time, your energy, your talents. We see this by the people there, right? They are completely surrendering to God, responding to his faithfulness. There's the last few verses here, verse 44 to 47. There's seemingly kind of just a few details that Nehemiah finishes up here. We'll talk about them in a moment, but let's read some verses here first. Verse 44. On that day, men were appointed over the storerooms, the contributions, the first fruits, and the tithes to gather into them the portions required by the law for the priest and for the Levites according to the fields of the towns. For Judah rejoiced over the priest and the Levites who ministered. So Nehemiah makes a note here as he begins to wrap up this chapter that there are folks whose job it is just to maintain the storerooms of the temple, to ensure that the various items that come in to support the temple are distributed to the priests who are doing the work there of the temple. Right? There is literally a full support team just to take care of the team that is leading the people spiritually, right? Think high priest and priests and Levites, everyone working in the temple. Verse 47, last verse of our text. And all Israel in the days of Zerubbabel and in the days of Nehemiah gave the daily portions for the singers and the gatekeepers. And they set apart that which was for the Levites. And the Levites set apart that which was for the sons of Aaron. Again, so these last few verses, Nehemiah makes a note of kind of, in many ways, the administration of items of the temple, right? How they're going to keep things running, how they're kind of ensuring that the priests are taken care of. Back in chapter 10, the people made a promise to provide for these people, to provide for the needs of the temple. And so we see them, at least up until Nehemiah's day, as he records here, making sacrifices to ensure that these important activities continue. Right? People are giving a tithe. People are bringing animals. People are paying a temple tax. And again, why does this matter? Well, you see them being faithful in supporting the work of God. They are thankful for how God has provided for them as individuals and as a country, and they are responding by supporting what God is doing there, by supporting the temple and the leaders who lead them spiritually. The leaders need to be supported if the work is going to continue, and the people of the nation play a key role in guiding the spiritual health of the nation. Last point, what are some good ways we can respond to God's faithfulness? Support the work of God. All right, again, you see this modeled by the nation, right? They are supporting what is going on there in the temple. Now, when I was in school, I remember I told you guys multiple times, I complained to God a lot. I complained, why didn't you give me a full ride scholarship? Why did you not make my life easier, God? Right? This is the way I responded to God. But honestly, when I was there, I was the recipient of a lot of grace, a lot of gifts, right? There was a number of scholarships I received from nameless donors. I had random gifts sometimes come in the form of people who would just kind of stop in town in Dallas and take me and my family out to eat, and that was just such a lifeline sometimes, right? Sometimes folks said, hey, I got a little extra money on my income tax this year, I want to bless you, and that kind of helped us just make things work that month. I even remember my last year, I got a suit from the school. It was kind of cool. Right? They figure if you're going to be a pastor, you need a suit to wear. I don't own it anymore, so don't worry. Actually, I do. I just choose not to wear it. They call it the marrying them and burying them suit. But I was the recipient of a lot of gifts. And so I decided before I even finished there that I wanted to give back to the very institution that invested so much in me. So my wife and I, we have set aside a portion of our budget that goes to that very school that gave so much to us because we want to support that institution as they raise up another generation of leaders, right? We want to support what God is doing there. If you want to best respond to God's faithfulness in your life, it's helpful to look around and to see what God is doing and to make an effort to support the work of God. How are you supporting the work of God around you? Sometimes that does mean finances, right? At the end of the day, bills do got to get paid, lights got to be turned on, not only in churches but in ministries. Salaries have to be paid. How are you supporting the work of God around you? Are you doing it financially? Are you doing it maybe through your prayer? Right? We have a lot of missionaries and mission organizations that we support. They appreciate the check we send them, but they also greatly value those prayers. In fact, many of them would prefer that over the money. Are you supporting the work that God's doing around you through your talents, through encouragement of those who are on the front lines? We see the Hebrew people here as they are dedicating the city to God, rejoicing in his faithfulness to them, intentionally supporting the work. And that's a great way for us to respond to God's faithfulness in our lives. Getting in that freezer those many years ago was not the best idea on how to beat the heat. Or it was actually kind of dangerous. That was why my uncle was a little upset. They put stuff on top of that freezer all the time. We should have responded a little better to that heat. But we as followers of Christ sometimes don't respond well to God's faithfulness, right? Often we come up with criticisms, negativity. We respond in bad ways to God's faithfulness to us. We need to be intentional about how we respond to his faithfulness. And so if you today are just overwhelmed by God's goodness to you, his faithfulness to you and your family, here are some very tangible ways to respond to it, right? Facilitating a heritage of faithfulness, right? Pass down your faith to that next generation. Completely surrender to God. Everything I own, my health, my money, my gifts, God, those are all yours. How do you want me to use them? And look around and figure out where God is at work and figure out how to best support that work, right? Those are some very tangible ways to respond to God's faithfulness. 2 questions for you and we'll be done. How are you passing on your faith to the next generation? Is it a faith worth passing on? And are you completely surrendered to the work God is doing around you? Let's bow our heads in a word of prayer. God, thank you so much for this text. And Lord, I just pray for every person who's here today. Because if they're human, Lord, just like me, we often don't respond well to your faithfulness. Lord, we respond with negativity. We respond with criticism. We respond with why you're not doing things. And God, it's just sad, Lord, because God, you have been so good to us. And Lord, I just pray for our hearts. Lord, help us to respond better to your faithfulness. Lord, may we look around and see those who are coming up behind us. Help us just pass on a heritage of faith. Lord, help us just to completely get over ourselves and surrender ourselves fully to you, whatever you want to do through us and with us. And God, may we look around as well and see where you're at work. And may we be willing to encourage and support that work. Because God, we love you and we struggle to show our appreciation to you, so may we do a better job. Help us with these things this week, Lord, in your amazing name. Amen.